going to go ahead and get started. I will now call to order the meeting of the Omaha Planning Board. The Planning Board members that are here today are Trenton Maggot, David Rosacker, Michael Pate, Patrick Morse, Christine Carnes, Vice Chair, and I am Greg Rosenbaum, Chairman. Members of the city staff that are in attendance today are Dave Fanislau, Planning Director, Sherry Rockwell, Acting Assistant Planning Director, Eric England, Planning Manager, Mike Carter, Planning Board Administrator, Alan Thielen from the City Law Department, and Lisa Agans is our Recording Secretary. Our rules of procedure are as follows. Notice of this hearing has been published. Copies of today's agenda are located on a table in front of us down here. You are welcome to come down and pick one up. The cases on the consent agenda will be heard first. Consent cases are perceived by the Planning Board to be non-controversial, have already been heard or been recommended for layover, and therefore will be read and voted on without the opportunity for your testimony. If you wish to testify, you may remove the case from the consent agenda. When each consent case is read, I will ask if anyone wants the case removed. If you do, please stand up and say so, and the case will be removed. If you do, please stand up. This case will then be heard in order in which it appears on the regular agenda after we go through the consent cases. When the case is heard, you will have the opportunity to come to the podium, clearly state your name and address, and give your testimony at that time. When hearing cases on the regular agenda, the board will first hear from the applicant, and after the applicant states their case, we will hear from the proponents, and then we will hear from the opponents. After both sides are heard, the public hearing will be closed, and no additional testimony will be permitted unless a board member requests additional information. When at the podium, please clearly state your name, address, and whom you are representing for the record. Your testimony is very important to us. In the interest of time and courtesy to others, please be short and to the point. We will try to limit each case to 10 minutes. Those directly involved in the case, please speak first. We request that large groups select a spokesperson to represent that group, therefore eliminating repetitive testimony. When giving testimony, please provide new information and try not to repeat what has previously been said. We do ask that all speakers and others be treated with courtesy and with respect. In that regard, please remain silent while seated, and please turn off your cell phones. Our decision to approve, deny, or continue a case made here today will be forwarded to the City Council for another public hearing and final disposition by the City Council. Conditional use permits are an exception to this rule. The board's decision made here today on conditional use permits are final and not forwarded to the City Council. Lastly, upon the advice of the Law Department, all communications to the board members from attorneys or other interested parties should be transmitted through the Planning Department so that they are made a part of the public record. The department will then transmit all that information to the board as well as to the rest of the public. Rezoning matters are an exception to this rule. A current copy of the Nebraska Open Meetings Act can be found on the northeast wall of this room. There are no changes to the consent agenda, so I will get started with the consent cases. Okay, the first consent case is agenda item number 5, case C7-19-31, applicant St. Robert Bellarmine. This is on for approval. Request approval of a major amendment to a conditional use permit assumed to allow religious assembly in an R2 district. This has been laid over from our February 6th meeting. Location 11900 Pacific Street. Does anyone wish to have this removed from consent? Seeing none. Agenda item number 6, case C388-036. Applicant Planning Department on behalf of the City of Omaha. It is on for layover. Request approval of an amendment to the Riverfront Redevelopment Plan. Location, area generally bound by I-480, 8th Street, Farnham Street, 10th Street, Leavenworth Street, and the Missouri River. Does anyone wish to have this removed from the consent? Seeing none. Agenda item number 7, case C10-74-179, C10-19-37, C12-19-38. Applicant, BHC Roads. It is on for layover. Request preliminary plat approval of Briggs Place Addition Replat 1, a subdivision inside the city limits with rezoning from R7, GC, and GI to R8, along with the expansion of the ACI 2 overlay district and the repeal of the PK parking overlay district. Portions of the property is located in an ACI 2 overlay district. Does anyone wish to have this removed? Seeing none. Agenda item number 9, case C10-19-41. Applicant, the Redmond Company. It is on for approval. Request rezoning from GI to CC. Property is located within an ACI 2 overlay district. Location, 7529 Dodge Street. Does anyone wish to have this removed? Seeing none. Agenda item number 11, case C10-19-44. Applicant, Anchor Point Development, LLC. It is on for approval. Request rezoning from DR to R4. Location, north of HWS Cleveland Boulevard between 171st Street and Kilpatrick Parkway. Does anyone wish to have this removed? Okay, seeing none. Agenda item number 12, case C10-19-43. Applicant, Noddle Companies. It is on for approval. Request approval of an ACI 3 area of civic importance overlay district. Location, 716 North 102nd Street. Does anyone wish to have this removed? Agenda item number 13, case C10-14-81. Applicant, 192 Maple LLC. It is on for approval. Request approval of a major amendment to the mixed-use district development agreement for Antler View to allow custom manufacturing. Location, southeast of 192nd Street and West Maple Road. Excuse me. Does anyone wish to have this removed? Seeing none. Agenda item number 14, case C11-19-36. Applicant, BHC Roads. It is on for layover. Request approval of a PUR planned unit redevelopment overlay district. The location, southwest of 46th and Dodge Street. Anyone wish to have this removed? Seeing none, moving on. Agenda item number 15, C8-19-45. Applicant, Josie Ortiz. It is on for approval. Request approval of a special use permit to allow auto sales in a GC district. Location, 3106 North 63rd Street. Does anyone wish to have this removed? Seeing none. Agenda item number 16, case C7-19-46. Applicant, Elkhorn Public Schools, Ryan Lindquist. It is on for approval. Request approval of a conditional use permit to allow secondary educational facilities in a R4 district. Location, southwest of 180th and Ida Street. Does anyone wish to have this removed? Seeing none. Agenda item number 17, case C7-17-67. Applicant, Millard Public Schools, John Brennan. It's on for approval. Request approval of a major amendment to a conditional use permit assumed to allow secondary educational facilities in a R3 district with a waiver of section 55-166 height to allow a 49-foot tall scoreboard. Location, 14905 Q Street. Does anyone wish to have this removed? Seeing none. And finally, agenda item number 18, case C14-19-47, applicant, Planning Board. It is on for approval. Request vacation of the north-south alley located north of Shirley Street, east of 91st Avenue, abutting lots 8, 9, and 11, Block 4, West Pacific Hills, and Lot 2, Sunset Meadows. Does anyone wish to have this removed? Okay, seeing none, I'll take a motion on those consent items for approval.
I move for approval of agenda items 5, 9, 11, 12, 13, 15, 16, 17, and 18.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Magid?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Pate?
I vote yes on all items. However, I'm going to recuse myself on item number 17.
Number 17. Morris?
Yes.
Carnes?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Okay, do we have a motion for the items on the consent for layover?
I move for layover of agenda items 6, 7, and 14.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Rosacker?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Carnes?
Yes.
Magid?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Okay, those were the consent cases. Those cases have been voted on and are done for today. If you were here for one of those cases, you are free to stay or you are free to leave. So the first 4 cases on the agenda are administrative cases only. There will be no opportunity for public testimony. Agenda item number 1, case C10-18-242, C12-18-243, applicant Gretna Public Schools, Dr. Kevin Riley, superintendent. Request final plat approval of Falling Waters North, a subdivision outside the city limits with rezoning from AG to R4. Location south of HWS Cleveland Boulevard and west of 198th Street. Eric, may we hear from the city, please?
Sure. So the preliminary plat of Falling Waters North was recommended for approval by the Planning Board back on November 7th and subsequently approved with conditions by the City Council on January 18th of this year. The applicant is proposing Gretna Elementary School on this 17.5-acre site, which is a permitted use in the proposed R4 zoning. City recommends approval of the rezoning from AG to R4, approval of the final plat subject to submittal of an acceptable final subdivision agreement prior to forwarding the request to City Council.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments, questions from the board? Do we have a motion?
I motion for approval of the rezoning from AG to R4 and approval of the final plat subject to submittal of an acceptable final subdivision agreement prior to forwarding the request to the City Council.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Moore?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Carnes?
Yes.
Magid?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Moving on, agenda item number 2, case C10-17-46, C12-17-47, applicant 180 Maple LLC, request final plat approval of Antler View East, lots 1 through 11 and outlots A through E, a subdivision outside the city limits with rezoning from AG and R4 to DR, R4 and MU. This was laid over from our February 6th meeting. Location, southwest of 180th Street and West Maple Road. May we hear from the city? Eric?
Sure. Planning Board recommended approval last month for a revised preliminary plat of the Antler View East subdivision and laid over the final plat of the first phase to address a few items. So that first phase final plat, which includes 11 lots and 5 outlots, is back before you with those recommended changes or the result of the layover last month. One of those items was to adequately address all of the proposed wetland areas, either to encapsulate those within an outlot or to properly mitigate those. One of the large outlots on the west portion of the site has been enlarged to encapsulate most of that, or most of those wetlands. The second item dealt with the south side of Lot 10 with fronting on the Parkway. In order to adequately buffer that proposed use, the plan now proposes an outlot with heavy landscaping, and no access drives from that Parkway to Lot 10. There's a few additional criteria that would have to be met with the Parks Department before going to City Council, but we are acceptable. I'm recommending approval at this point. There are also a few minor mixed-use items that will have to be updated before the mixed-use development plan can be forwarded to City Council. But the staff is recommending approval of the rezoning from AG and R4 to DR, R4, and MU, subject to submittal of an acceptable final mixed-use district development agreement, and approval of the final plat subject to addressing the conditions of a revised preliminary plat approval, and submittal of a final acceptable subdivision agreement prior to forwarding to City Council.
Thank you, Eric. Any comments, questions from the board? Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve the rezoning from AG and R4 to DR, R4, and MU, subject to submittal of an acceptable final mixed-use district development agreement and approval of the final plat, subject to addressing the conditions of revised preliminary plat approval and submittal of a final acceptable subdivision agreement prior to forwarding this request to the council.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Pate,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Carnes,
Yes.
Magid,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Agenda item number 3, case
Recusing myself.
KC 10-16-289, C12-16-290. Applicant Fountain West Office Park LLC request final plat approval of Fountain Ridge East, Lot 1 and outlots A and B, formerly Fountain West Office Park, a subdivision outside the city limits with rezoning from AG to DR and MU, location southeast of 192nd Street and West Dodge Road. Let the record show that Chris Carnes has recused herself. Eric, may we hear from the city?
Sure. So this is the first phase final plat of Fountain Ridge East, as you mentioned, formerly Fountain West Office Park, which was approved as a preliminary plat by City Council back in April of 2017. There's been a lot of activity in this area over the past few years with the Fountain Ridge East and Fountain Ridge West developments, as well as the adjacent Avenue 1 project. So as I mentioned, this is the first phase, which includes 1 lot and 2 outlots. The overall development plan is proposed for over 600,000 square feet of office space in 10 buildings. This first phase includes 183,000 square feet of office space within 3 buildings. There are a few items on the mixed-use development plan that need to be updated to reflect the ongoing coordination with the adjacent development as well as the city of Omaha. So those items will be updated before the mixed-use plan is forwarded to City Council. With the proposed phasing plan, Lot 1 does not have frontage on Burke Street, so providing access from Burke Street to Lot 1 will need a small portion of Lot 1 extended to Burke Street so that we can include that full north-south access drive within the platted buildable lot. That being said, conditionally, the final plat is consistent with the approved preliminary plat and ordinances of Chapter 53 subdivisions of the Omaha Municipal Code. Staff recommends approval of the rezoning from AG to DR and MU, subject to submittal of an acceptable mixed-use development agreement prior to City Council, and approval of the final plat subject to the 2 conditions listed in the recommendation report prior to City Council.
Thank you, Eric. Are any comments, questions from the board? Do we have a motion?
Motion for approval of the rezoning from AG to DR and MU, subject to the submittal of an acceptable mixed-use development agreement prior to forwarding the request to City Council, and approval of the final plat subject to the following conditions prior to forwarding the request to the City Council for final action. 1, revise the final plat to extend Lot 1 to Burke Street to include the full north-south access drive within the platted lot. And 2, submittal of an acceptable final subdivision agreement.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Morris?
Yes.
Carnes is recused. Magid?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Agenda item number 4, case C10-18-17, C12-18-18. Applicant, AVG-CFM 204Q LLC, care of J.F. Carter. Request final plat approval of Coventry North, lots 2 through 11, outlots A and B, a subdivision outside the city limits with rezoning from AG and MU to DR and MU, location southwest of 204th and Q Streets. Eric, may we hear from the city, please?
Yeah, sure. This is the next phase of the large Coventry development, specifically the second phase of Coventry North. The first phase for Lot 1 was for an apartment project that is adjacent. This final plat includes 10 mixed-use lots, 2 outlots within 14 acres. There are a couple items that the city would like the opportunity to sit down with the applicant to go over. So we are actually recommending layover of this final plat. Those specific items, there's a portion of the main street that goes through this mixed-use development that includes parking on both sides of that right-of-way. The right-of-way width needs to be 100 feet minimum in that location, and this proposal of the final plat had about 78, 79 feet. Additionally, there is a typo in the report. It's mentioned as Lot 12. It's actually Lot 11 on the final plat, Lot 12 on the mixed-use plan, so sorry for that discrepancy. But that specific lot has street frontages on all 4 sides, and there's quite a bit going on with the layout, and we just want to make sure that we don't have any blank, empty facades facing one of those right-of-way. With mixed-use requirements, the building has to, have acceptable building frontages and facades facing those public rights-of-way. So we need a little bit more information as far as how that building would function and operate, including potential building elevations, to make sure that this layout is acceptable. So for those 2 reasons, we are recommending layover. The official recommendation is layover to allow the applicant time to coordinate with city staff regarding the requirement for increased right-of-way widths to accommodate mixed-use code requirements, as well as the orientation and layout of the commercial building on Lot 11.
Okay, any comments or questions from the board? Do we have a motion?
Move to layover to allow the applicant time to coordinate with city staff regarding the requirement for increased right-of-way widths to accommodate mixed-use code requirements, as well as the orientation and layout of the commercial building on Lot 11.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Carnes?
Yes.
Magid?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
That was the final administrative case. We'll move on to the agenda item number 8, C10-19-39, C12-19-40. Applicant Aldrich Holdings LLC, location southwest of 46th and Dodge Street. What?
No, that was.
I'm sorry. Yep. Request preliminary plat approval of Old Town Commons, a subdivision outside the city limits with rezoning from DR and R4 to MU. Location southwest of 204th Street and Honeysuckle Drive. May we hear from the applicant, please?
Neeraj Agarwal for the applicant, Aldrich Holdings, 3814 Farnham Street, 402-981-3735. Here today for plat and zoning. Essentially, we're proposing a 17-acre mixed-use development. The bulk of this would be 6 acres, consisting of 126 multifamily units, technically in a row house fashion rather than a standard apartment development. A mix of 2 and 3 bedrooms. The 3 bedrooms would be approximately 1,500 square feet with 2.5 baths and a 2-car garage, backloaded. The 2 bedrooms would be 2.5 bath as well with 1 car. And really the idea is to provide a novel rental product in the market, especially out west, where we've seen a lot of apartments looking to do something different by providing townhouses. The commercial component consists of 3 lots, about 3.7 acres, 1.8 and 1.1. And really the goal is to primarily just do office in all 3 lots. We do have interest from a large user for the 3.7 acre lot, and the anticipation is for the remaining to be as office kind of healthcare focused as well. With that, kind of the timeline overall would be to go through entitlements this year and then start construction on the row houses spring of next year, approximately 18 to 24 months to build. With that, I'll open the floor to any questions.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions? All right. Any other proponents that wish to speak? Seeing none, are there any opponents? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Any additional questions or comments from the board? Eric, may we hear from the city?
Sure. As Neeraj mentioned, split of office, commercial, and apartment-style housing. We're pretty pleased with the proposed layout with the main street that incorporates both the residential and the office component with on-street parking and bringing those buildings up to that street frontage. A few items to work out, as is customary with a preliminary plat, but conditionally, the preliminary plat complies with the goals and objectives of the Omaha Master Plan and the requirements of Chapter 53 of the Omaha Municipal Code. Staff recommends approval of the rezoning from R4 and DR to MU, subject to submittal of an acceptable final mixed-use development agreement prior to forwarding to City Council, and approval of the preliminary plat subject to the 9 conditions listed in the recommendation report.
Do we have a motion?
A motion for approval of the rezoning from R4 and DR to MU, subject to submittal of an acceptable mixed-use development plan prior to forwarding the request to City Council, and approval of the preliminary plat subject to the 9 conditions in the recommendation report.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Magid?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Carnes?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Moving on, agenda item number 10. I'll apologize in advance if I mispronounce the name. KC 10-19-42. Applicant Christopher Haminu Capeta. Am I close?
Yes.
Good. Request rezoning from R2 to CC. Location 2321 North 73rd Street. May we hear from the applicant, please?
Good afternoon. I'm Mark Sanford, architect, Mark Sanford Group, 1306 North 162nd Street. I'm representing Chris and Erica. Their desire to rezone this property, which is kind of left on this entire block. It's the only piece that's still an R2 designation. The rest of the block is all commercially rated, and they'd like to keep the house. Currently, they're living in the house, and their desire. They also own a restaurant in Ralston, which is a burger place. It is a sit-down restaurant. They'd like to do a drive-through at this location, and the existing house has a driveway up the very center of the lot right now. We're going to close that in and get rid of the access into the garage that's underneath the house, and then create an entrance on the south side and take it all the way to the east, and then stopping on the north side of the existing house, which has a kitchen within that spot where they'd be creating their burgers and drive-through only. There's no sit-down, there's no traffic expected to come inside the house or the building, because it won't be a house any longer, but will be used commercially. and they will be the only two people within the property that will man the restaurant or the drive-through facility. And that's their desire right now. The hard part, obviously, is the undeveloped street. Right now it is dirt, but it does see some traffic because to the south there's access into the commercial properties that are to the south of this property. And other people do park along the street, but they are anxious and very willing to have traffic come down their street, pick up a burger, and go on their merry way. And it's a fantastic burger, by the way, so you should stop in Ralston. With that, and we only show 6 parking spaces because there's really no expectation of any other occupancy inside the residence.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Any other proponents that wish to speak? Seeing none, are there any opponents? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Any comments, questions from the board?
Are you redoing that building?
No, well, we'll redo the north side of the house and the kitchen area to create a preparation area and a kitchen that commercially they'll be able to produce their product.
How many people are living in the house? Just those two? Okay.
And a very large dog.
Is there a separation between that and the restaurant, or?
Well, there's no, if there needs to be a separation, we'll tackle that when we get that part of the plan. We haven't done the planning on the inside yet because we need to get this rezoned before they can do that.
Well, I like that, so it's entirely self-contained, so the properties on either side are not, there's no cross easements or anything, right?
No, that's correct.
Okay. It's definitely unique, but I like that it's, you have plenty of stacking, it looks like, and 73rd Street, which is residential on the, what direction is that, on the west?
West, yes.
Okay, so,
And there's no houses directly across from there.
yeah, what is that, looks like a parking lot or something?
It's a tennis court, I believe.
Yeah. Okay, so the lights aren't gonna shine in somebody's bedroom or something?
And this property, excuse me for interrupting, this property is up on a hill, but we do take that into consideration with the amount of the drive as we come up the hill and get onto the east side and then come back down the hill. So this won't have any lights shining in anywhere. Our parking that I have shown in the front shines to the north. There's quite a bit of buffer on the west side. Then there's nothing across the street except a tennis court. Don't see that getting developed into anything else anytime soon.
Have you had a chance to talk to any of the neighbors?
They have not. I did hear from one of the neighbors, and I talked him through the project. He didn't have a problem with it. He just wanted to know what was going on.
Has he tried the burger?
Well, we're going to drop a sack off. So.
It would have helped if you would have brought him today. No.
I know. I wish I did.
What kind of signage are you proposing to place on this?
We haven't looked at the signage per se, other than the probably a monument sign for the facility itself, and then a entry and an exit. Probably a do not enter on the north side, since this will be one-way traffic.
Because it doesn't really, it kind of, but it really doesn't front on 72nd Street. So
No, it fronts on 73rd, that's correct.
Are they going to expose this word of mouth then, or?
It'll become a destination, because you certainly won't have a pole sign that sticks up over the old McDonald's, so. But they have a very good reputation, and when I did go to lunch there, I had to sample their wares, and it was a very busy place in Ralston, so it's very popular.
What's the name of the place?
Pardon me?
What's the name of it?
It's Ralston Big Way Burger.
Ralston.
Big Way.
Big Way Burger.
Is that on 72nd?
Yes.
Okay.
So is that McDonald's? Is that vacant?
Yes.
So the obvious question, that works better than this house works in my estimation anyway. Is there
Any reason why you wouldn't have made an attempt to buy that property and use that?
Chris,
Go
you
ahead.
need to give your name and address, please.
Oh, okay. Christopher Hamenupeda, 2321 North 73rd Street. And to answer that question, we did call on it, and basically they are selling it, but it's not to be used for a restaurant. I think they want to make sure there's no residual business being picked up by.
And
That's my thought.
that's
I
the
might
same
be
thing
wrong.
McDonald's did over at Westwood and Montclair, is that they totally deed restricted against competition.
future use?
Does McDonald's still own that?
Well, it doesn't matter, because they put what deed restricted, so you couldn't.
Because they moved up the street.
Yeah, they moved to 72nd and Blonda. So they,
Chris, you're okay without having the visibility, and can you see that building from 72nd very well?
Yes, yes, and I've done, drive-bys to make sure, it's still visible. We might put some signage on the back too. And we started as a food truck, so we know how to survive in, very minimal situations.
Any additional questions before we hear from the city? Eric, may we hear from the city?
Sure.
I did that. I closed the public.
It's a difficult
That's right.
request, just based on the location with this site fronting 73rd Street. The master plan does call for office commercial for this area. This is the only portion of the block that is not zoned commercially. However, as you saw in your pre-meeting, 73rd Street is severely deteriorated and definitely, lacking standard improvements that we would like to, or that we would usually require for a commercial operation. So the problem with this site is the grades. It'd be very difficult to have it connect to Lake Street on the north or to 72nd Street. I mean, that would be the ideal scenario without that fronting on 73rd Street. Unfortunately, with the grades, I don't think that's a feasible option. As currently proposed, we have a site plan, but with a rezoning, we cannot lock down a site plan. So that's part of the concerns. There are some issues proposed with the site plan. I don't believe it meets the required stacking requirements for a drive-through. While it's potential to get a waiver from the Administrative Board of Appeals, that is another hurdle. There are potential screening issues with the commercial drive-through with the adjacent residential properties, among other items. If it is, if it was to be tongue-tied here. If it was going to be converted to a commercial building, there will be several types of building code requirements that would be put in place that are not necessarily easy to convert a single-family residential house to. With the increase in the intensity of the proposed CC zoning, as I mentioned, we're not able to lock down a specific site plan. Perhaps if it was a different type of office user that we were able to do a use permit to lock down some of the requirements and improve the 73rd Street to the standard requirements, that could be a potential. But based on this specific application for a straight rezoning to CC without being able to address the condition of 73rd Street, we don't believe that's the right thing and does not meet all the elements of the master plan. So we are recommending denial.
Any other comments or questions?
Just a question for Eric, if I might. 73rd Street is in disrepair, great disrepair. Is it feasible or possible that the applicant could make public improvements to that street at his expense or their expense?
Ryan Haas is here with Public Works, and he can speak further to that, but I believe the option would be available if they wanted to improve the streets. We can work with them on the mechanism to help, facilitate that process.
That's an option, perhaps.
That's an option, yeah, at their expense, so.
Yes.
I don't know if it's customary, if it's happened before or not. When someone wants to use.
Well, I've never seen a street in disrepair like 73rd Street either.
I mean, if they were to improve it, is that a street that the city would ever?
Improve, or what's that process? Ryan, you want to?
Ryan Haas with the Public Works Department. There are any number of unimproved or underimproved streets in the city's jurisdiction, and we don't have a funding mechanism to proactively go out and pave those things. So They will continue to remain so until such time as, really the only time we require condition an approval of an application is if it's a conditional use permit, special use permit, or a plat adjacent to one of those unimproved streets. And you've seen some of those here in the recent past few years. This is just a rezoning, so we don't have the ability to condition this approval on the improvement of the street.
Patrick, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. I'm just going to make one comment. The city has recommended denial. I don't know what the board's going to do yet. We'll wait for a motion and see what the vote is. I'm not certain we would be doing you a favor by approving this. I think once it gets down to meeting all city codes and stuff, it might, you know, it might be pretty expensive to comply with everything. I hate to always turn down somebody, a couple that's trying to be entrepreneurs, start their own business, make things better in their neighborhood. They got a good idea. I'm not certain we'd be doing you a favor, though, but that's my only comment with this. Any other comments or questions from the board?
I guess I have, I'm sorry, Dave. I would just add just to the same thing that the problem with that site was there before you came, and it's obviously that the city doesn't have it on their priority list to improve that street. And then you put that on top of what that cost might be to try to make it work for you would be pretty expensive. And then all the other adaptations you'd have to do to that facility to comply with the commercial codes. It just gets to be pretty difficult. And like you said, you know, recommending approval would probably lead you down a path to spending way more money that maybe isn't going to be feasible for you. That's all I have.
Erica has a question for you.
Erica Harrod, 2321 North 73rd Street. I guess my question would be, if everything around us is already commercial and they're functioning as businesses and all of their traffic comes through, what makes ours different for needing to pave the street versus them?
Okay, we'll let Eric answer that, but I think go ahead, Eric.
Sure. You know, the difficult thing, not all office and commercial uses are created equally. There are others that are more intense in nature as far as vehicular trips coming to and from the business. You know, if we could guarantee that this was just going to be a small office building, perhaps, you know, like an accountant's office or something like that, or, well, maybe that's a bad example with tax time. They'll probably get quite a few visits, but if there was a...
Probably get more.
Yeah, if there was a, you know, a more generalized or simple business, I guess, that didn't have the potential traffic. I mean, a drive-through restaurant, you know, the zoning code doesn't treat drive-through restaurants differently. It looks at them all as the same. So, you know, whether you have a Starbucks that does hundreds of cars a day compared to a small restaurant that maybe don't have that clientele, unfortunately, we have to look at it all as a similar use type. You know, without the ability of locking it down with a use permit, and, you know, perhaps we could revisit a different zoning district that would require a use permit, but that would bring in the requirement to pave that street. And, you know, I know that's a high cost and expense. So I guess that's where I would stand on, you know, although there are other commercial operations there, they don't access mid-block on 73rd Street. You know, the McDonald's had access to Lake Street and 72nd Street. The business to your south, I believe I don't know that street, but we believe it's a different scenario.
It mentions in your operating statement that you expect 50 to 75 orders a day, and you'll be offering the drive-through service as well as delivery service.
Yes, sir.
Do you expect more deliveries in that 50 to 75 orders, or will it be more in the drive-through?
From our experience, it's going to be with the delivery. We know we are not facing 72nd directly, so even though there's visibility, it's not a heavy traffic that's just from our experience of being in the restaurant industry.
Yeah.
It's not gonna be that heavy.
So you're not even expecting 50 to 75 cars per day. It's orders that are likely to be
Right.
more delivery.
Right. And the property is very large to the point where even if we had like a few cars, stack up, we should be able to accommodate it. I've lived there for 6 years. I know like how many cars drive on that street and what happens, with all the neighbors there. I think, I think it will work out.
Yeah.
How many cars? Estimated, how many cars a day do you think travel on that? You're talking about 73rd Street now, right?
Right. Maybe 20. Maybe 20.
Okay. I was just sharing with, asking Eric, I said, I guess if we did approve this, and they have to go ahead and spend the money and try to make it compliant with all the city codes, have we done any damage? And, no, the answer from Eric was no. Did you want
Well,
to
I just
expand
wanted,
on that?
I mean, we as staff view that that intensive of a use, it shouldn't be there. I mean, without 73rd Street being improved, I mean, that's our thoughts. And
Okay.
Well, no matter how we vote, you can still take it through city council. Yeah, so this is
Okay.
that is true. They have the option to proceed to city council. If you do recommend denial, city council would have to approve a supermajority, which is a vote of at least 5 to approve.
If we approve it, they just need a majority, 4 to 3, right?
Yes.
Okay, are we done with questions, comments? Do we have a motion?
I motion for approval.
second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Rosacker,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Pate,
No.
Morris,
Yes.
Carnes,
Yes.
Magid,
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
No.
motion approved 5-2.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Please do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The way I did the last one. Called the haystack trend.
You won't be disappointed.
Thank you very much.
I think that ends the meeting. That was the last item on the agenda. We have minutes for February 6th pre-meeting. Do we have a motion for approval?
Move to approve the minutes from the pre-meeting of February 6th.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you record the vote?
Moore,
Abstain.
Pate,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Carnes,
Yes.
Magid,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Now we have the minutes for the public meeting. Do we have a motion?
Move for approval of the minutes from the February meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you record the vote, please?
Pate,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Carnes,
Yes.
Magid,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Moore,
Abstain.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Do we have a motion for adjournment?
Move to adjourn.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you record the vote?
Pate,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Carnes,
Yes.
Magid,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion to adjourn at 2:19.